Hey everybody, this is Tinderbox Meetup for October 19th. It's Sunday and it's Tinderbox Meetup with Michael Becker, and I'm Mark Bernstein, the designer of Tinderbox. Warning, I may have to bail early at this meetup. I've got too many things going on. Next week we have a meetup on Hookmark with Hook creator Luc Boudoir. New ink this week for me at alistapart.com, a article on design for amiability, further work on the Vienna project from chapter 2 of the coming book. We've had a couple of backstage releases with lots of infrastructure, stuff that doesn't have features but fixes things like hangs and crashes. Combination of Claude AI and uh, good crash logs is very powerful for actually solving some of these intermittent problems that are hard to reproduce because they're highly improbable. But when they do, they bring the whole system down. So this is an excellent time if you have the misfortune of having any of these mishaps to send me the crash logs. They have always been valuable, but now they're more valuable because Claude is just wonderful at sleuthing out what it thinks it's going on. And the new model is much better than the old model at taking, nope, that's not the problem, and being redirected and thinking some more.
So are you saying that crash logs are you can interpret that Claude can help you interpret the crash logs?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you
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 feed it the
you
crash logs and it comes back right away with a theory. That theory is often not correct, but then you can show it particular methods from Tinderbox and it's will refine its theory, and we've caught a few of them.
Interesting.
It it still often takes two or three shots to actually come up with a diagnosis, but it's progress. David,
so how you so you're feeding Claude so this is the spirit under the spirit, the context, the invisible spirit of paranoia, and the family jewels are buried inside the software. So you ship a crash log to Claude. How much of Tinderbox are you exposing to Claude?
Yeah.
hardly any.
Okay,
Uh,
that's
uh, the crash logs are just literally a list of the stack frames for each processor when everything fell apart, and an explanation of why it pulled the emergency cord, which is often dereferencing a null pointer or a garbage pointer or things like that, memory management mishap.
so
Uh,
effectively you're just reading a dump. It's reading a dump.
it's less than old-fashioned dumps were. You could get more out of the dumps back in the day than you can out of the crash logs. But back in the day when you had like 4K of RAM, you look at all the RAM. No one's going to look through a gigabyte of miscellaneous RAM, especially when it's memory, disk mapped
Well,
and all sorts of
right.
nonsense.
Yeah.
Oh,
Following dumps is just almost impossible these days.
oh yes, a great regret. I had a customer in Japan, well, mainframe product, and they air freighted a Xeroxed glue bound dump that the creator, glanced at it for under 5 minutes and threw it away. But air freighted this 3 or 4 pounds of 8.5 by 11 Xerox dump. It was, I regret I didn't keep it.
Yes. Now, along the similar lines, if you're using Claude or Gemini or whatever with Tinderbox and it gets confused, it does the wrong thing, and or it forgets how to do something that it should know. I'm very interested in hearing about it, uh, both because of mishaps, but also Claude's view of Tinderbox is not our view. For example, I've been having it work on my book outline, mostly filling in references and the like. And I found that it could not find chapter, the first notes in chapters. And this is because I was telling it what the display name was, and it assumed that the display name was usable in a path, and it's not. I automatically putting chapter numbers in to the display name, and it doesn't know about display name is not the same as name. And so that's easy to fix, but it hadn't occurred to me that it would care. Uh, Also, if you're using Tinderbox with Gemini or Olamo or anything else besides Claude Desktop, even Claude Code, I'd like to know because I'm going to need lots of help getting this up for uh, other platforms. Also, if you are in the habit of using Claude Desktop in a language other than English, you can do this, and it's good even for fairly unusual languages. But again, I'd like to know, especially if it goes off the rails when you try to work in another language. So that's what it is, the news from Lake Wobegon this week. And here's Michael Becker.
No, before we move on, can you
Yeah.
share the walk through the process of sending a crash log and how would one find that?
Okay, Tinderbox crashes, and you get this window that says Tinderbox quit unexpectedly. And you say, damn right, I didn't expect that. And underneath is 10 pages or so of cryptic gibberish. And that cryptic gibberish is actually a list of what each of your cores was doing at the moment that the system decided that it dare not proceed. Usually, this is because the system suspects that whatever it's about to do next cannot possibly come to anything good. Uh, so just copy the text in that window and paste it in an email and send it to me. If you're in a hurry, you don't have to explain what it is. I'll know what it is. And don't worry about flooding me with these. I can file them away as easily as you can. But it's actually quite helpful to have the information about where things are going, especially since most of these, it's been probably a year since I've had a reproducible crash report. These are all situations that arise only when two unexpected things happen and happen at the wrong moment, and so they interfere with each other. So they're hard to they're hard to reproduce. They're hard to explain. But I'd like to get those that remain, at least those that are common enough that they cause trouble on a fairly regular basis.
Okay, and if I happen to click out of that window and need to find them somewhere else, you want to share your screen and show people?
Yes, search the forum for Mark Anderson's perennial post or check in ATB-ref. The reason is that there's a folder in your library that has all these logs, but it moves in different versions of the operating system.
All right, I found the forum post. Good point.
And if you want to navigate to the library in Finder, go to the Go menu and hold down the Option key, and it will reveal the library. It's hidden away from most users, but if you know about the option key, then you're responsible enough not to delete something important.
Yeah.
And if you're in the terminal, all hell.
Sorry?
I said, and if you're in the terminal where you have full access to the library,
Yeah.
all hell can break loose.
Yeah. If you're not careful. All right. All right, everybody. Well, welcome to this week's meetup. We don't really have a planned agenda. Typically, we go around the room, new people introduce ourselves. Nobody's new. And we then dig into any particular topics or projects that people have been working on. I've been particularly busy with a bunch of other life-related things, so I've not been doing a lot. So I've got no topics myself. It's specifically related to Tinderbox, but I do have one on. I'd love to explore with you all a conversation around the best way to start collecting. I'm getting into some new foundational research projects, and so I don't want to, and this is I could use your help on this. What's the best way to start, collecting information and processing it through? Is it DEVONThink? Is it bookends? Is it Zotero? Is it files on the hard drive? How do you index? I could really use a strategy of indexing foundational materials. And because I found bringing those foundational materials into Tinderbox, not to be, one of my guests wants to come up. This is Sana, by the way. Bringing foundational materials into Tinderbox can create a collection fallacy that develops quite a mess. So if anybody has like best practices around like DEVONThink, Zotero bookends, etc., like that, I'd love to get your feedback.
Yeah. Could you give us a little bit more on what you're actually working on? This would be quite different if you're like learning history of baseball or learning the history of the Prussian Empire or.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of research on AI models, teaching AI, creating courseware around that. So I'm reading a ton of different papers, a ton of different articles. I'm highlighting materials in Readwise. I'm downloading PDFs. I'm downloading reports. That's one project. Another project I'm doing is my cybersecurity work. And so I've got like multiple, it's not a specific project. I've got multiple things I'm kind of doing simultaneously. And I've got my mobile marketing stuff I'm doing with Mary Beth. So let's say there's like 4 different, work streams. And I want to be able to process that stuff that I'm reading, process the stuff that I'm highlighting. And I don't necessarily want to be dumping it all into Tinderbox because that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So what's the best approach for doing that?
David?
Michael. Yes, I believe I'm having an event this Friday at Babson where somebody dropped a bunch of money on them to create a center, and this is an AI event. Back in April, they charged me the princely sum of $200 for a day. And AI is now they've clearly understood as a business school that they underpriced. And so now they're charging me for a single day the princely sum of $400. So I may have access to, very likely have access to beyond English speakers, since the Babson population tends to be at least 50% multilingual. So any hints as to and I'm color me extremely skeptical, except that I find these tidbits, but I'm extremely skeptical about AI until Mark says it's useful. Claude is useful when you feed it logs. Okay, constrain it to a well-bounded set of knowledge, then I'll change my tune. But this whole thing of the whole known universe of LLMs, that's just a complete non-starter in my world. So any academic hints as to, that'd be wonderful.
Okay, I missed the comment, that comment in response to my comment. So where are you looking
I
for?
think that was one back, Michael.
Okay.
Which-
that was-
So
But even then, in the context of AI research, I'm not sure. I don't think I understand. What do you mean?
well, as oh boy, uh, my world is behind the corporate firewall. Biggest, oldest, most paranoid, most reason to be paranoid, ugliest software estates. That these big firms, I make no distinction of the color of the uniform they wear. Uh, uh, and it's a completely open. The kind of people I deal with on a balance in the world of the IBM mainframe will absolutely categorically not consider exposing their world to the world of the LLMs. Just not
Yeah.
going to happen.
No, it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, but my research is showing 85% of Fortune 500s are all using cloud computing, and
That's
they're exposing their.
don't believe you're an academic, Michael. Don't believe what you read.
No, I've got background information on this as
Yeah.
well. It's just what I'm reading. Most enterprises are exposing their network to cloud computing, and they're not securing it properly, and it's not even
the worst
a related issue.
What's funny is the worst offenders turn out to be the C's in the executive offices.
Yeah.
They're the ones who take the entire contract of a major customer and just ship it off to AI saying, review this for legal purposes.
Yeah, where's the holes? And it's like, oh, gee, I can see how here's your business model.
Yeah.
So,
No,
I mean,
but
this
before
is
we
the
go,
number one complaint of people in the security departments of these organizations, that it's their CFOs and CIOs and CEOs that are their biggest vulnerability.
but before we go down the AI rat hole again, real quick,
Yeah.
thing by the way, I think would be interesting is I came across and I heard the CEO of this company. I just put it in the chat, Liquid AI speak, and they figured out, modeling off of the neuron network of a worm's brain. They've figured out how to model a small language models that will, with 19, and the example they use with 19 AI network neurons versus 100,000 in a transformer based model, they can achieve the same, if not better, results with enormous amount of less electricity use, which they then are able to then put that model on edge devices and keep it out of the cloud. So very interesting work these guys are doing. So I just put it in the chat.
Well, back to your earlier point, Michael, or the question you originally raised.
But before you get to that,
okay,
though, Mark's got limited time, and we wanted him to do the information city response first, and he's going to leave. So should we do the information city thing first, or do you want to respond to my question?
No, please, let's do that.
So before you bail, Mark, maybe you can do the information city, and then we'll have Chuck answer my question.
Okay, with luck, you can now see my screen and the Information City window. Okay, this is I don't know if the map view, yeah, there is a map view. And I need to get some Zoom crud out of the way. So this is a fairly conventional small bit of notes that we developed while working on this view. And inside the view, it looks like this. Okay, the mouse pointer you can use to point at something. When you point at the thing, its name appears for a short period of time. There's some stuff on the paper about why we do that. The short answer is you can look at this entire view as an experiment in keeping usable spatial hypertext without labeling every last thing, because a map of about 100 things, which is what you can fit into a practical window, also has about 100 labels, maybe more, or 1,000 character glyphs, maybe more. And in terms of graphic design, it's lots of text with some other stuff. And that's
Mark,
not right.
So Mark, let me pause you there though. So when I open up this XCity file, I end up in like this blank space out in the middle of the nowhere, and I actually don't even know how to find this.
Okay, let's talk about getting around. Navigation is, well, first, if you see something and you point at it, you or the camera, whichever you want to think about, looks at it. So you can look at the ground.
Let's say I've opened the file that I downloaded the XCity from the file, and all I see is just a big black screen. I'm actually not seeing what you're seeing. So,
okay.
So I'm questioning, like, how do I even find the city?
You have the two tabs, right?
I have the two tabs, yes.
There are two tabs at the top. One is a map view, an outline view of the whole document, and the other is City XCity.
Okay.
And this is what I expect you to see. It's what I see when I click that.
Okay. But what happens if I've navigated away and the city is now totally disappeared and I can't find it and I can't get back to it?
So
something that made it go away.
If you press the W key, you go forward. If you press the S key, you go back.
Got it.
If you press the A key, you walk sideways to the left. Press the D key, you walk sideways to the right.
Okay.
If you press the Q key, you rotate to the right. And since I'd already walked out to the edge of the city, there's a whole lot of city out of like empty plain out here. Now it's not very interesting. And the E key is the reverse of that. Now, if you press the 1 key, it takes you to an arbitrary place. And that's useful if you get completely confused or if you find yourself pointing up at the sky or something.
That's probably what I'm doing is I'm pointing up at the sky.
It's on the forum quite recently, and I'll put the URL, or someone can put the URL. There it is. Finally, the minus key makes you closer to the ground, and the plus key takes you away from the ground. And if you get far enough away from the ground, it can be actually quite difficult to find things. But the aerial view can be useful to have. Okay, so that's how you navigate. You do need to open a lot like Gaudi view, like tree map view. The city view is mostly about the contents of a container like map view. And so if you open it on an empty container or a container with only one thing, it's going to be an empty plane. Now, you can make the plane less empty by right-clicking or control-clicking and say, make me a fountain. And similarly, if you can delete things and also hide them, which removes them from the view but doesn't delete the underlying node. You can say, I want this to be in the container, but I don't want it to appear in the city.
Okay. And by the way, how do you get back down to ground level view?
Minus.
Minus. And how do you reorientate yourself so you're not looking down from the top, from the God view?
Click on something.
Okay.
Like here I'm looking at my feet. And the trick is to just click something at the edge so you look up, and then actually click on a thing and you will look at it.
I see. All right.
Okay. Again, it helps if you have not set up things in interesting relation to each other. Tinderbox will arrange them on two sides of a sort of street, and that means you don't have the problem you sometimes used to have in map view of everything piling up on other things and having to sort them out. These towers are actually themselves containers, and the uh, upper stories are notes inside the container. So if you see, this is remember for the paper, and this is remember for the paper, the evil twin of locative hypertext. And we'll see that corresponds to the second, or if you're in Europe, the first story of the tower, and so on up. Oh. So that's enough to get started. If you have a bit structure and you don't want that kind of structure, you can usually convert it to a different kind of structure. And if there's something with, yes, city kind is an attribute that determines what kind of building this is. City X and city Y are its positions on the ground plane. City rotate in degrees as its orientation. That most buildings can have things like badges, and there's a dictionary of stylistic variants which you can use programmatically, or when you do things like modify door to make it rounded. Now this has a rounded style door. These things can be useful for making buildings stand out, or at least be noticeable, uh, which is helpful when you want to learn the semantic meaning of your space. So that, with any luck, will get you started. Oh, one thing I should mention is that the view, for reasons that I don't really understand, sometimes decides when the window is when the view pane is not selected. It will sometimes decide I'm going to look up at the zenith. I don't know why. If it does, just click on the view pane and it will go back to looking in a sensible place.
And how would you use this to write a research paper?
This is actually what we used this in the early days, what we used this for. Trying to think about, this is my standard problem approach to writing a research paper. I've got, okay, release notes for coordinating with the group. I've got principles I want to remember, things that we want. I've got a tower of what are these major sections of the paper, major points, and other things not to be forgotten. And eventually this got so tall, I separated more out of it. And over here, like I wanted to start by sketching out some ideas about aesthetics. And so I've talked here about Ruskin's idea of Gothic and Lawrence Boybrook's idea of a Ruskinian aesthetics of digital artifacts. And here we've got elaborations of the Ruskinian stuff going down along this little side street. Very recent book on Sullivan and Wright that I put opposite the Ruskin Tavern, and some more notes on that. Now, this is pertinent, I think, to what you were saying, Michael. In some research projects, like your AI research, one of the problems is you're looking at a lot of internet resources, and it's hard to know whether any of these resources are going to be useful again. So you either keep all of them, in which case you've got a pile of websites and web references and PDFs, most of them useless,
Right.
or but which you've compiled scrupulously, or you end up with some notes and vague recollections that on second thought there was something really useful, and it was something that I did Wednesday afternoon, I think, and I think the page was green. But trying to sort that out is hard. And what I've found useful is that it is to take notes in Tinderbox, to save references on anything I take a note on, will be an endnote. And that may be a partial reference, but it should include either enough to get it in the Library of Congress, or a URL, or a library call number, which for some reason, Harvard's library lets you retrieve things to by call number. So if you know the call number, you can get the book. I don't know what the use case is, but it is convenient. So,
Yeah.
But I'm here using book size artifacts. There aren't many of them. They're hard to make copies of to throw into an everything bucket. And they're fairly easy to keep references to. But there are certainly domains where you're in the opposite domain, and it's much easier to just throw the PDFs in DEVONThink and try to make a note of why you might want to look at it again.
Interesting. And how would you go about talking about the like what will you might ooh, that's weird. So somehow my world just went like this. Any idea why that would happen?
Just click on something and it will be better.
Got it. And any idea like the types of shapes, like what would you put on a like I guess it's up to you, like what's the different different building shapes mean to you, like a dome versus a, it's like you need to build the semantic model for yourself.
Yeah, there aren't as many of these shapes as I would like. Uh, of course, that's research, and you never get quite as far as you like. And the person who was going to flesh out the modeling had life crises, medical crises, and couldn't do it. But there, you'll rapidly see that it's useful. As here, you have quite a few buildings that have kind of the same structure and shape, but you can give them make neighborhoods by having related but different trim colors. You can have neighborhoods by having the same building, like a row house.
Mm-hmm.
Do any of the buildings have keys, as if you can share them with another person? Um, the appearance of a building is completely determined by the combination of its city kind, its badge, and the city data, which is a dictionary like this. Is this the aesthetics? Yeah. So you see there, the lights are on. It has an awning where the one next to it has no awning. It is flipped. That's left, right flipped. It has a particular window style that's for the upper story windows on this building, and the shutters are open. If I ask it, modify window, shutters, ajar, it redraws the shutters, so instead of being all the way open, they're kind of at 45 degrees. Just looks different.
Got it. And I'm confused. Can you do me a favor? Can you create a street?
I can. Streets may not persist much longer. I'm not happy with streets.
Yeah.
Uh,
I don't know what
but
they're doing. Is it actually creating a street, or is it creating buildings alongside the street, which don't make
it's
sense?
creating
Buildings.
a set of buildings that are adjacent and attached to this bit of asphalt here. And I thought that this was going to be really useful. It's an alternative to the arrangement of the towers where we have a container, the street is a container, and the houses are inside the container. But it created some, in some ways, it's messy, and I'm not sure that this is the right approach.
On it. Now, in one of the questions I have for you, in map, you can type, you can start typing the name of a note, and it will jump you to that note. I think that would be interesting in Information City too. Like if I had a building called, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that, or rather than jumping to the note, it might be nice to look in the direction of the note.
Correct. So that that would be a quick way to orientate you, right? Because I know I want to go in the direction of Eastgate, so get me some distance away from Eastgate building.
Yeah, that would be good. It won't work literally because like I try to type release notes and I move because R does nothing but E rotates. L does nothing but E rotates again, and then A sidesteps. And so we've got to do something besides blind typing, but
Yeah.
Yeah, and Roger, yeah, I mean, this idea of having the name fly out is actually probably a good idea. Transient labels are nice. The actual implementation is tricky, but the trickiness is actually a famous old hypertext paper. So, for the purpose of the paper, I thought it was probably more interesting to say this is clumsy and there's this classic paper on how hard it is to get right. So, we don't mind it being clumsy for the time being. We do mind, but we pretend to be above it.
Oh, interesting. So that's interesting. So I see like badges and stuff show up on buildings. Okay.
Yes, most building types have a place to put a badge. Several building types you can add a sign, which is either that sign like this one has, or a sign like the pub just hangs out a banner. And if there's an image in the note, it grabs the first image and paints it on the banner.
Interesting.
The information density is not as high as I would like, but you can actually have a fair amount of note density. And
By the way, I also noticed, can you try making the text window smaller? It keeps snapping back to the middle on me. And what if I want to see more of the city? Yeah, so for me, when I let go, it snaps back to the middle.
are you on
I'm on the latest.
Mac OS 26?
Um,
Tahoe?
yeah.
Yeah, this is believed to be a taco issue. It's been reported in Sequoia, but it's more common in Tahoe. And it's thought on the developer Slack to actually be in the framework. Uh, so we're waiting to see if it really is or if we have to find a workaround or what. But this kind of view splitting seems to be a widespread complaint with Tahoe. I expect it'll get sorted out.
Got it. And how did you say you look up again just by clicking something?
You click an object and the camera will look at it.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. And is there a way to make, like, let's say I wanted to add a note to the top of a building. How would I do that?
Modify, add new floor.
Got it. Add new floor. Got it. And then you could name it. Got it. And so that's in other words, that's how you would be adding a note into the container.
Exactly.
Got it. Bruce, got a question?
It's not so much well, it's a thought. Maybe it's a question. Mark, as I'm watching this and I'm thinking, I'm giving a little parent presentation tonight, and we have like a group of assessment, how should I put it? Assessment characteristics, treatment characteristics, they link to one another. And I'm always looking, I'm using the program Beautiful right now for developing presentations and finding that's a time saver. But as I'm watching this, I'm thinking about how useful it could be as a presentation tool. And because what it's doing just by its format, imagine I have just 2 or 3 buildings. One is, what are our treatment targets? Another, what are our assessments parameters? And another is, what are the interventions that we use? I could see some interrelationship, and also just the metaphor that it's a building and that the building has stories kind of gives the idea of bullet points and things like that, I think, sort of some more meaning and cohesion. And I guess I'm just wondering, is it on the roadmap that this becomes a potential alternative way to present as opposed to PowerPoint and its ilk?
Yeah, well, I wanted to do that for the talk at Hypertext, but they insisted that everything be in PDFs, which is disappointing, especially for a Hypertext conference. Channeling Mark Anderson, who is on leave this week, Mark is particularly unconvinced that it's possible to figure out the logic in someone else's information city. I think that's kind of discomfort that audiences actually enjoy, and they would like to figure out how you've got this organized and what the doodads mean. And the fact that it isn't full of text to be read also makes it nice for presentations. As in,
Well, I'm just thinking, I mean, for
yeah,
example, we have as part of our diagnostic labels, we separate asocial from internalizers from externalizers. We don't separate them, but they're three categories. I could easily imagine, and I don't think you don't have rooms in these buildings, right?
no.
Okay. But even to the extent of having buildings that have different physical characteristics could help someone visual. I guess what I'm thinking about is I'm thinking about how this helps one visualize relationships in a way that bullet points really doesn't get there. And I do what everyone else does, is I try and find an interesting picture, which drives me nuts, to try to, capture what the meaning is behind what I'm presenting. And this just strikes me as a different, potentially useful way of doing that.
Yeah, and I think, really the whole point of spatial hypertext at the 40,000 foot, the whole point of these visualization systems is to try to capture and convey some aspect of the information that is not easy to simply write down explicitly in a list.
Well, and to the point of hypertext, what I'm thinking of is we use different interventions based on the diagnostic characteristics of a student. And that's one of the things that makes my programs a little bit unique. And yet helping people understand that and remember it, I think anytime you bring in a visual element such as this, that immediately captures someone's attention in the way that just seeing a bullet point with a photograph doesn't do. So it just strikes me as there's more here. There's more here than meets the eye in a way, I have a feeling. I think you're onto something that has a lot of legs to it.
Well, one question, yeah.
Chuck?
I was just going to ask if there's any way to incorporate links into the 3D model. I mean, this is hypertext. We think of hypertext being associated with links that cross boundaries. 3D gives you a lot more options for showing boundary crossings.
You could
Yes.
have be flags in between buildings or electrical wires.
Yeah.
Even better than that, Silas has a proposal that I just didn't have time to implement. While writing the paper, I thought I would, but I just haven't been able to do it. To have birds flying between the buildings in some sort of simple spherical or parabolic arc, which is not very realistic, but it actually has a nice property in that, as we all know from map view, for any set of links that isn't trivial, you cannot find a layout that doesn't have some accidental link crossings.
Right.
The fancy name for this is graph planarity. A planar graph is one that can be drawn in some way with no link crosses. And yeah, there are lots of planar graphs, but there are lots more non-planar graphs. But in 3 dimensions, any graph can be embedded uh, with no link crossings. And this
Well,
way, you look up and you see the birds that are high up flying from left to right. You know there's a distant link out there, and there's a distant destination out there. And so you don't just have a line that crosses your map view and you've got no idea what it means.
well, I mean, just off the top of my head, what really strikes me as being potentially very useful would be just as if you hover over one of those buildings or stories, you see the associated text. I could see extremely useful if you could see the links in plural to other things in that 3D view and see how these things are related and perhaps easily navigate to other parts of that 3D
Yep.
based on the links. That to me seems to be very useful for a whole variety of problems I can think of. So knowing that you're thinking about it is I guess sufficient at this point because obviously all of this takes work.
Yeah. And
Another
you're
question.
right. Having link, either highlighting or exclusively showing links from the selected building is also interesting. And that you could do by sending out beams, laser beams to the destinations.
Another question mark is what it seems like the container only allows one layer underneath. What if you had nested containers?
Towers and streets are nested containers, but they only go one down.
Because it's 3 dimensions.
So I can't have like a heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. I can't have a container within a container.
Well, all of this is a container. This is a container inside the container. But we currently have no way of expressing that a note inside a container inside this container itself has contents.
Right.
Now I thought about ways to do that, and there, we could. There probably are ways you could do it with multiple turrets or something, but I'm not entirely sure how to do it. And we wanted to find out if the whole thing was of any use at all before going too deeply into that question.
Makes sense.
One of the principles was that if your view is unobstructed, you should be able to see an object from anywhere. For example, so like there aren't multiple apartments in each floor of a tower or apartment building. One tenant per floor, which is occasionally done in very small buildings, especially in Tokyo. But here it is useful because otherwise there would be placed, if we had 6 or 8 units on the 7th floor, you'd have to be in the right position to even look up and see that apartment. And that would be a problem or an inconvenience anyway.
Do the windows have any specific significance?
They don't. They could. There is a dictionary entry that turns the lights on and off, the interior lights. And one thing we had discussed was using that to show occupancy, whether this is a note with contents, or like if I turn around, you see all of these have black roofs, just a hyphen for a title. And these are things that are ready to be filled up. Now, this is, again, for hypertext theory, making a 6-story tower before you actually have the things to put into it is an interesting hypertextual move, and was convenient here because, yeah, you do want to make a street that's more than just a piece of asphalt on the ground.
How would you rotate the face of it? How would you rotate a building? Like you want a building side by side another one.
I rotate.
Got it. I gotta keep doing the menu. Got it. Makes sense.
And if you want, you can also, you don't have to city rotate, can just be like and so you can have things rotated by less than 90 degrees, but the menus only supply the 90 degrees.
Got it. So in some ways, it's like if you're in a SimCity environment, starting from a blank slate could actually be easier to help you understand this. It kind of evolves as you.
Yeah, it's a way to think about it. And the original proposal from Deberger was really worried that people would get lost in hypertexts, and speculated that people are pretty good at moving around in cities and understanding the structure of cities. In fact, both of his assumptions turned out in the event to be wrong. People don't often get lost in hypertext, and people are actually less good than he thought at navigating in cities. But that's okay. We, in fact, sometimes like to be a little bit disoriented, because a little bit of disorientation in our notes is a way to actually see them fresh.
You know, an interesting commentary on navigating in cities. I spent a lot of time in New York City and also a lot of time in the city of Boston. And, you know, in a professional context. And one of the things that always struck me was New York City, in one sense, was very easy to navigate if you weren't blocked from seeing the long views on the streets. Whereas Boston is a little bit more difficult to navigate because the streets curve so much. So, you know, it's the geography of a city sometimes has a significant impact on its navigability, but in surprising ways. You know, in certain respects, it's easier to get lost in New York City, even with its very neat grid, than it is in Boston, just because visibility gives you more clues in a somewhat more haphazard, or as we say, laid out by the cows city like Boston versus New York, which was all planned out. So the whole issue of navigation within a 3D environment is probably quite complex from a human perspective.
Yeah. There's a good book by Lynch, I think Kevin, called The Image of the City, from the 70s, I think, where they actually did study how people understood the layout of cities and got around in them, doing questionnaires. You know, you've lived in London for 30 years. Draw me a detailed map of the area around Hyde Park. And of course, most people don't often draw maps and aren't particularly good at it. But it's fascinating to see what people remember and think is useful for getting around places.
Mm-hmm. And of course, as a networking guy, I am very familiar with that problem because networks exist on so many planes.
Yep. And just yesterday, I mean, I've lived in Boston for decades, and I'm like right in the middle. I'm on Boston Common, and I want to get to the Chinatown T stop, which is not where I usually or often go, but it's both no further than, and it's likely to be less crowded because fewer people go there. And I look up and I see a couple of looming buildings above the crowd. And I say, okay, it's not as far as the insurance building, the MetLife building, and certainly not as far as the Hancock, but it's got to be like uh, further than I am. So I'll just go to the end of uh, the public garden and turn left. And this took me like 6 or 7 blocks out of my way, uh, almost a mile too far. But going not all the way to the landmarks that I could see was a huge snare and delusion. But and I knew how to do this. But again, part of the utility of notes, assuming that notes have utility, uh, which is why I think the AI project is so interesting. We will actually be able to measure this. But if notes have utility, I'm pretty sure that having fresh perspectives on familiar note collections is a good thing. And being able to move in the plane at least, and occasionally to move up and down uh, is helpful. And in any case, the idea of having a hot dog stand called Metaphor just made my day.
I think I want a comment from Dave Rogers on navigation on a curved surface.
I just use GPS.
Okay, I'll qualify the specifications prior to GPS.
Loran chart.
There's always a sextant.
Yeah, if there's a horizon.
Hey, Mark, can you
Yes.
Mark, can you explain the fountain? Like the fountain seems to it's similar to like the street. It has a whole bunch of domes that pop up around it.
Yeah, whoops. Need to have. Yeah, again, the fountain.
So presumably that fountain is a container, and it'd just be a quick way to then
Yeah,
create 6, 7, 8 notes.
again, at the very outset of this, I had been reading Deberger's thesis, and the whole question of landmarks was much on my mind. And so, and performance was also always a huge concern here. It shouldn't have been. GPUs are amazing, but I thought we maybe would find that 3 buildings would be all we could manage, in which case there wasn't even a paper here. So I wanted to start out by making something that would serve as a landmark. And I wanted to add 100 simple buildings just to see if that brought the processor to its knees beyond being brought to its knees, or shrugged off. And let's go up here. So you see when you make the fountain, it automatically makes these surrounding buildings. And in fact, we can move this out, be clear, we can move them all out there. And I'm not sure. The fountain does have some performance impact, not that you should worry about that. And its landmark aspect became less important once we got towers going, but that's okay. We'll see if they're useful or what.
Is the street and fountain, are those effectively the same kind of thing, just different representations? In that a street also.
Yeah. At least that's a useful way to think about them. They're both, yeah.
Okay. A lot of food for thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it was fun to do, and it wasn't a huge tech investment, and it makes an interesting demo, and made a kind of interesting hypertext paper.
Yeah, and maybe I'm getting a little disassociated by the way it's always kind of angling looking down. And I know you've already said it like 3 times today, but how do I look up from the ground? Like
just point at something.
I do that, but it still makes me kind of look downish. Maybe it's just a.
I mean, in the very worst case, okay, I'm really looking at my feet now.
Right.
And so, worst case.
And what keys are you using to do that?
I'm just clicking on things.
Oh, got it. I see. You know, perhaps double clicking on a building would zoom you in closer into it or something like that.
That could be done. I don't think we aren't doing anything with double click at the moment, so that would work.
Or like help inch you forward. Interesting.
Yeah, but for that matter, simply keeping you from accidentally getting inside buildings turned out to be quite tricky. I mean, there are plenty of edge points here as it is, and we had some doozies for a while.
Fascinating.
So that's the news from Lake Wobegon.
Nice. All right. Maybe we can move back to the other topic we had. Chuck, you were going to delve into my existential crisis, how to keep 4 different workflows organized and figure it out. And
all I was really going to do was observe that I have the same problem. Have had it for decades. There are, in terms of the tools that I use, I'll start with email. I've mentioned that before because that's my ultimate note-taking tool. I will often start a note first in email, and in part because of the fact that email gives me the opportunity to share it with someone else. And so I get, feedback things like that. But also because email has a fairly rigorous option for storing things, so that it's easy to store email and keep track of it by date and time and who you corresponded with and subject matter, things of that nature.
Luckily, you're not working. Well, lucky you're not facing John Bolton's issues right now using email.
Yeah, well, okay.
Let's go on to another topic.
Yeah, so the next thing that I guess I would say is that DEVONThink came along and really upped my game considerably, because it made it possible for me to capture information in more or less the way it came to me, which is largely the web. So one of the things that I found most useful with DEVONThink when I started using it was that it replaced bookmarks. I don't use bookmarks in a browser. So if I find something which is useful, I capture it as a link or an HTML document or a bookmark, however you want to describe it, in DEVONThink. And it wasn't long before I learned that, you know what, that capture as PDF feature of DEVONThink is damned useful.
Yeah.
Because web links are so ephemeral. And maybe you can find it in the Internet Archives, but it's a mess. So if it's something useful, I have learned capture a snapshot of it. And the easiest way to capture a snapshot of it is a PDF. And as I became more facile with that, I started, looking for PDFs or ebooks or things of that nature more regularly. And the other thing that I got into the habit of is, if I spent the time to search for something and find something, keep it. You never know when you'll want it again. And so
And hard
computer
drive
storage,
spaces.
hard drives are darn cheap.
Yeah.
My total email, which spans 3 decades, is it's approaching 80 gigabytes of space.
That's nothing.
There's a lot of duplication there, which is nothing. All of my DEVONThink files and everything else, I mean, you're huge libraries. Probably is approaching, certainly several hundred gigabytes, probably approaching a bit over a terabyte. But again, it's cheap. So DEVONThink became much more, has become, an absolutely vital approach. And just this principle of, if it was useful to me at the time, if I thought it had relevance, capture it, even if I don't know what to do with it. Just put it in someplace.
Yeah.
And then I've been, over the years trying to figure out how to bring Tinderbox into what I do. And so I found that Tinderbox is useful, but more from the perspective of providing a more structured way to organize my content, to look at things in terms of a more project-oriented approach. I'm trying to accomplish something. Yeah. So I might start out with, the problems I want to solve as, a set of notes. And so I often work with that within that outline environment just to structure some thought. And then where Tinderbox becomes very useful is when I can say, but that relates to something specific. And I can put the documentation associated with that and the references and things like that into Tinderbox and link things across so that I can maintain a much richer relationship between the things I'm working with that go into a project.
Right.
And then most recently, I've discovered the value of Zotero. Historically, the kind of work I've done, I haven't needed to do referencing. I'm not producing academic papers, things of that nature. And so much of the material that was actual working reference material was not the kind of thing you would cite in a normal fashion anyway. It's just a web page, somebody's blog posting, things of that nature. So, but what I found is that Zotero is very good at, from the browser, picking up all the relevant details associated with something I found.
Right.
And that's a very valuable,
URL, all of that.
Right. Dates, authors, things like that. And what I'm hoping to be able to do is to make much better use of Zotero as a way to establish the relationships between different pieces of information.
By the way,
And
one
I'm
thing,
finding that's useful, but it's going to have to get into my workflow more.
yeah, and
So
I guess
all I can say is
I got to get better at my workflow. I'm just getting lazy. And a couple things is, one thing to remind you, you can have DEVONthink, you can have DEVONthink watch your Zotero folder. So everything you store or in Zotero can then be searchable and discoverable in DEVONthink.
yes, and that is absolutely something I have been intending to do for the last several months, to get all that, extra connectivity between the tools in place. And I just,
But
like I
you
said,
can
I've
do
just
that
been
with
having to deal with so many
HTML.
other technical crises or technical issues I have to deal with. The issue of maintaining technology is the number one problem these days. I hate to say it.
It is. It's a pain in the ass. And what do you
And
do?
I deeply appreciate Mark Bernstein and his ability to do that.
What do you do with things like, do you tag your articles in Zotero or DEVONthink, or do you spend the effort to do that?
I do. I've got to do more effort. I've got to rethink how I want to do that. What I find is the approaches I use in DEVONthink don't work in Zotero. So I've got to, kind of rethink how do I organize Zotero content, which is more about the sourcing of material, as opposed to DEVONthink, which is more about how I personally approach and categorize the material.
Yeah.
And while it might seem like those are the same things, what I'm realizing is they're not really. And that's where some further linking would be useful. I'm very anxious to attend next week's session on hook marks, because I keep thinking maybe hook marks is that missing piece of glue to tie these things together. I have just not had the time to play with it enough to figure out where it fits in. But it feels to me like there's something else we could add into all of this, and it could be very valuable. And of course, the other thing is AI, and what does AI do with all of this? And that's going to be an interesting experiment. I'm not there yet.
And I guess this is another question I have for Mark Bernstein. So then once you start getting stuff into Tinderbox, how do you, the only way I've found it is using Foxtrot, but how do you then make your notes inside Tinderbox externalized from, or discoverable from outside of across Tinderbox files or across projects? I find that, once I start doing a bunch of work in Tinderbox, I can't remember which of the 100 Tinderbox files that thing I did is in, and where is it, and how do I find it?
Yeah, again, this is one of the reasons why I've got to get better in my own workflow about the way I link things between DEVONthink and Tinderbox in particular. I have at times, and maybe there's just I'm getting old, but there have been occasions when I've been saying, I know I have that piece of information. I know it. But then it's like, well, which tool did I have it in? And sometimes, oh yeah, I did that in email, not DEVONthink, or I looked that up and cataloged it in Zotero. And that's why I think, maybe if we could have AI automatically search all these different tools and help us develop the hook marks between them, things like that. I'm getting a little bit wild and fantastical here, but something like that might be the way to survive old age.
But only if it's locally working on the edge and not in the cloud and not shared with the
right.
Yeah,
right.
Which is, after all, why Apple is holding out its vision.
Yep.
Yeah. So, Mark, do you?
I'm actually glad Apple's not
Caving
full force into the AI space. Their discipline is something I actually appreciate, but at times it can be frustrating.
So, Mark, what are your thoughts about trying to rediscover your work across Tinderbox files? Do you have a thought on that?
Oh, I don't have a good answer for that, but I'm really committed to Tinderbox, and I use it a lot, and I think I'm kind of a busy guy, but I think, oh, and I've got more different Tinderbox files now than ever before because each AI project has its own focused Tinderbox. And that actually is important since I don't want the AI to have continuous access to everything. It will get confused and it will frighten me. Uh, but given all of that, I still only have, say, 8 Tinderbox files that I use all the time. Okay, there's another dozen that I may open a couple of times for support, but yeah, those are short term. I'm fixing someone's problem and then not keeping a copy of their diary or whatever. Dave.
So that is a potential valuable addition from AI, where I could foresee a time not very long from now, where you have folder actions, where you can, when you save your Tinderbox file, and the container, the folder that it's in, notes that it's been updated, runs an AI agent that summarizes what the changes were in that Tinderbox file and keeps them in a sidecar or a separate text document in the folder, or just something in the library that kind of records a history of everything that you've done in that particular file. Sort of like the versioning software, but only conceptually, the highlights of it does pretty well right now summarizing things. I can foresee a time when it can summarize your actions and serve as an aide de memoire or whatever, for finding stuff again.
All
Yeah,
this
I
is
forgot what.
really, really good stuff. And upgrading to Zoom has blown away my backgrounds of libraries. Uh, so I grew up in an environment with allegedly, by the mid 60s, 10,000 books. And my father constantly looking for a lost book, misplaced clipping, et cetera, et cetera. And it took 40 years for someone else to write his book. So this process of, you got to put it away correctly when you come across it, so that the future you, that mysterious person who has been mentioned here multiple times, that future you can stumble across it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of mental horsepower that shows up at these meetings, these intellectual soirees. That is, I mean, all confronted with pretty much the same problem. And and this madman, Mark Bernstein, who seems to load himself with, oh, I think I'll try this and see if I can make it work. And I don't have any training whatsoever as a librarian. Good stuff. Wonderful stuff. Yeah. Keys. Yeah. Where the hell? Yeah. No, yeah. You got to put them. Yeah. Well, it's part of the discipline. That's why I'm complaining about missing Mark Anderson. We need the discipline of the two Navy guys, where if the filing is done wrong, people die.
Well, not really on admin, but the Navy, and I suspect all the armed forces had what was called a standard subject identification code. So every official document that you produce as an instruction, a notice, or whatever, had this SSIC code that was used by the yeoman to file it. And it could get pretty creative, and it got very elaborate. I don't know if it's still in existence, but I like it was like the Dewey Decimal System, and Johnny Decimal. I don't have the discipline to implement that, but it is a pretty well thought out means of sort of organizing your digital library.
How about Hazel? Does anybody here use Hazel? I'm looking at dropping something. It appears in the inbox email. Yep. You want to file it the moment it comes across, where you make the decision of this is noise, forget it, or this might be useful.
I use
Anybody
Hazel.
use? Okay. All right.
So it
I'll upgrade.
keeps my download folder manageable. So all PDFs get routed to a PDF intake folder for subsequent processing, which never happens. And same thing with applications and disk images and so forth. It keeps the downloads folder under control.
In a commentary on AI, 1988, I went to a small firm that had just lost a contract or a bid for the Army for naming things. So the Army and I never came across the Navy one, but since IBM or Army, this request for work was a name up to 255 characters long. They demanded it had to be with AI. This is 1988. And the story was, I mean, we didn't get the guy I was working for had a working product in mainframe assembler that names were maybe 40 characters or maybe even 30, any kind of commercial use. But it was for AI, had to be an AI, 1988. Story was they spent $15 million on whatever state of AI was then, and never got even to a working prototype. And obviously today, the domain has, think of how much, and what did we have for personal computing in 1988? Nothing.
Yeah.
So anyway.
We had Macs.
Yeah. Well, and this guy, the guy I worked for, a Brit, did his mainframe development on a Mac. He was the guy that put me onto Mac. And if you're a serious computer person in the world of IBM, you only run Mac. End of discussion, because I can run Windows on a Mac. I can't do it the other way. So that's my 2 cents.
Nice. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for the help. Chuck, I will definitely try to implement some of that today to get over my cognitive dissonance. It's driving me crazy.
Yeah, I think the point is that we all have to figure out what works for us. And it is a discipline problem.
And I was just about to say
self-discipline is challenging.
It is a personal discipline problem. That's the barrier.
I said self-discipline.
Yes. Well, you left off the self.
Yeah, I think I was just about to say that. I think it starts with the fact that I really don't want to do the work. And so I've got to get over that first.
You have to approach the problem with the mindset of a Marine.
Yeah.
You only capture what you can capture in an automated fashion, because otherwise the work will not be done.
Yeah.
If you can't capture it in an automated fashion by the nature of the work you're already doing, forget about it.
Not going to happen.
I'm not sure I agree with that, David, but anyway.
Well, and I will say this, that blogging is a journal, is a very wonderful aid in finding what was I thinking about, and using Tinderbox to resurface things from some period in the past. You could, from on this day, and then each year on that day, the things that you wrote about, it can be inspiring and it's helpful. So I had to figure out how to make something work that I made work over a year ago and couldn't recall it, but it was in my blog, so I found it.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, everybody. Thank you very much, and we'll get Hookmark next week. See ya.
Yep. Looking forward to it.